Hello, legal warriors. Here's another video to help you know what to do. What do you do if you're pulled over for a suspected DUI? What are the do's? What are the don'ts? If that interests you, stay tuned. It's coming right up. My name's Lance Fryrear, and I do this channel about legal criminal defense to educate the public because there's not a lot out there. And in this video, again, I'm going to cover what are some do's and don'ts if you're pulled over for a DUI. If you've already been cited for DUI, well, we have other videos on that, but this is educational. So let's say that you're pulled over for a DUI. What should you do? What shouldn't you do? Well, this isn't official legal advice. This is things that I've seen that could help a case or not, and so let's just get right into it. So if you happen to get pulled over for a DUI, the first thing you want to do is try, number one, to park in a way that makes sense. That's where you're legally parked. That police officer is going to be noting everything you do. They're going to note if you park at an angle, or if you hit a curb, or even if you're not parked between parking slots in a parking lot. So do your best job, parking and driving, so the officer can't use that to claim that you were driving under the influence. What you also want to do is you want to try to cooperate with the officer. Don't give the officer a hard time, because if you're belligerent or you're acting difficult with an officer, they might say that's a sign of intoxication. What's another thing that we have to worry about? Well, the officer is going to ask you to do field sobriety tests. And we have a video on field sobriety tests. What are field sobriety tests? They're physical tests for an officer allegedly to figure out, supposedly, and so you can figure out if you're able to drive or not. Us in the defense business try to pretty much think they're not possible to pass because they're subjective. They're subjectively scored by the police when they're having you do these field tests. So for the most part, if you're pulled over for a DUI, most people are better off not agreeing to do field sobriety tests. In 20 years of doing this job, I've yet to see anybody pass a field sobriety test. We've seen some people do okay, but it's generally not going to help you because you're nervous, you can hardly hear the instructions, you've never practiced doing these field sobriety tests before, and you have an officer who many would argue have already made up their mind, that they've already believed that you're driving under the influence once they smell any alcohol at all, and then they're starting the investigation for DUI. So most people are better off not doing field sobriety tests. Next, the officer's going to ask if you had anything to drink. Now, we're not allowed to lie to officers, so in most situations, we just want to be careful what we say there, right? We have no obligation to answer any question of a police officer, but we do have an obligation not to lie. So you're going to use your best judgment there. But obviously, we're probably a little bit better off if we don't talk about finishing a fifth of rum before driving. So the officer's going to listen to what you say there. And so you want to be careful about how you answer that question. So what have we covered so far? You want to be careful how you drive. You want to not fight with the officer, be cooperative with the officer. Generally, we're going to be better off if we don't do the field tests that are voluntary. Is there any type of consequence for not doing field tests to our license? No, there's not. We're going to be careful about what we say about how much we had to drink. And then we move on to the next phase. If we do the field sobriety test or we don't do the field sobriety test, the officer's typically going to ask you to take a portable breath test. Now, if you've had nothing to drink, if you've had almost nothing to drink, well, sometimes a portable breath test is not a bad idea, because a portable breath test is not admissible in court against you. It's mainly a tool to help the officer, because the officer has a hard time sometimes determining what to do in these situations. Just because you've consumed alcohol doesn't mean that you're driving under the influence. And so if you have any doubt, most people are better off not taking the portable breath test. Again, there's no consequence for not taking the portable breath test, the handheld device where you have to blow into. Um, and so if you do take it, and it's a really high number, it's just going to confirm what the officer thinks. It's not going to be admissible in court against you because they're just not that scientifically valid or scientifically maintained. It's a good tool, but you're not going to be hearing about the portable breath test again in court. So let's say that an officer goes ahead and makes a decision to arrest, right? So you've done what you've done. You've either done the field tests or not. You've either spoken to the officers or not about the drinking. Hopefully things have went okay, but the officer is still doing their job and they made a decision to arrest because they think that you've been driving under the influence. So now what happens? How do you help your case now? Well, you're going to be taken typically somewhere, if it's an alcohol case, to be taken somewhere that has a breath test machine, an actual something called the Draeger, a big old box with a tube in it. And the officer is typically going to ask you to do a breath test. And so in this situation, you still have options to try to help yourself. Okay, again, we want to cooperate with the officer. We don't want to resist arrest. We're not going to be lying to the police, but we are going to be exercising our rights typically. And so once you get to the police station, that either on the road or at the police station or where the breath test room is, the officer's going to ask you, hey, Kelly, you have a right to an attorney. And so at that point, you do want to ask to speak to an attorney. Almost nobody does, it seems, from all the reports we see, but you do want to ask to speak to an attorney because you need to figure out, do you want to take the breath test or not? And there is no universal answer about whether or not you should take the breath test at the station. Our friends and my friends might ask us whether or not they should take a breath test, and the answer is it depends. And so once you are put in contact, typically with the public defender, the officer, hey officer, I want to talk to an attorney, right? The officer we'll find that attorney for you, call up the attorney. What you need to do now is you need to ask for privacy, okay? Ask for privacy, because if the officer is listening in, you can't speak freely to your attorney. So if you don't ask for privacy, the case law says that it's no big deal if the officer just stands and listens to everything you say. And so make sure you ask for privacy. Be polite about it. I know it's a scary situation, and the officer shouldn't take offense to that. And then you're going to privately talk to your attorney, okay? At least the public defender, most likely, who's on the phone. And they're going to ask you some questions. How much did you have to drink? Okay, try to remember what type of drinks you had, when you had the drinks, when did you start drinking, when did you finish drinking, and what might you have eaten, because that person on the end of the phone is going to be able to make some determination in their mind about what you might blow. Other thing that's really important is how much do you weigh, and race can make a difference too, because different races have different enzyme situations about how alcohol is processed in the body. So that's not as important as the weight, but it's important that you get all this information out to the public defender who's likely talking to you. You should also let them know, did you take the field sobriety test? Did you admit to drinking? If so, what did you tell the officer? And why were you pulled over? Was it a traffic accident, or was it weeding, or was it speeding? What was it? Because that's going to give that public defender some ability to advise you what they think is best. So take your time. Time is on your side typically. Get your questions answered. And then once you're done, then you're going to let the officer know that, hey, you're ready, and you're going to tell the officer your decision to either take the breath test or not. Again, while I can't give you legal advice, I don't know the specifics of a future case that hasn't happened. For the most part, we suggest that people do take the breath test, and unless they're just really, really hammered, take the breath test, because nowadays, if you refuse a breath test, they're just going to do a blood draw anyway. A couple of years back, before marijuana was legal, the system wasn't set up so smoothly to get warrants for blood draws. But now if you refuse, it's pretty easy for a police officer to, get a judge to wake up in the middle of the night, whoever's on call, to sign a warrant to get your blood drawn. And so they're going to get the number anyway. and then you're going to have worse penalties and a worse license suspension for refusing to take a breath test. So let's say that you have agreed to take the breath test. So is it over? What else can you do to try to help yourself? Well, it's important now you pay attention, okay? Again, I can't give you advice to not cooperate with officers or things like that, but I can advise you to pay attention, because here's how it works. You're going to see the officer either ask if you have something in your mouth or actually look in your mouth, and that's called an observation period that the officer is beginning, okay? For your breath test to be valid, the officer has to be able to swear that they kept you under constant observation, whatever that means, okay? Does that mean if the officer turns his back, the observation period is blown? Does that mean if he looks down, is it blown? Or if she looks down, is the observation period now invalid? Well, it's case by case, but I need you to pay attention to see what the officer is doing. And if the officer can testify that you didn't put anything in your mouth or you didn't vomit or something like that, then that breath test is more likely to be ruled valid. If the officer can't testify to that, if you left the room to go to the bathroom, if he left the room, if something happened that distracted the officer, I need you to remember that. Because oftentimes we can get a video of the breath test room that will show what's going on, but if you remember a little something, that will help us. Now, also I need you to remember, are you handcuffed during the breath test or not? Because some people, just out of nervous habit, if they're not handcuffed, they'll put their hand in their mouth. They might bite their nail, they might do things. And you putting something in your mouth that's a foreign object will invalidate the test, okay? So, if you put your own finger in your mouth, that could invalidate the test. And I'm not saying you want to do that, because the officer's going to, scold you and is going to be watching because they know how to do their job. But the main thing is the officer needs to be able to show that you didn't put anything in your mouth for 15 minutes prior to the test. So what's the final thing you can do? Final things. The officer's going to want to ask you DUI interview questions. Usually it's going to be best if we don't answer the DUI interview questions, because those questions are designed to cut off defenses. Questions are something like, how many hours of sleep did you have last night? Well, if you say you had 9 hours, I guess your driving bad wasn't because you were tired, it's because you were drunk. Without looking, what time is it? Or what's the date? Well, if you don't know the time or date, I mean, you're nervous. It could have changed dates overnight. Must mean you're drunk. That's the reason why you don't know why. Are you under the care of a doctor or a dentist? And, what have you used? So these questions, while you want to cooperate with the officer, you don't need to cooperate in building a case. And so usually we want to not answer the DUI interview questions. And a public defender will typically tell the officer, hey, the client's not going to answer questions, but again, it's up to you to assert your rights. So don't answer the questions is typically what we would suggest for our clients, advising them how to behave in the future. And then what about the breath test machine? It is hard to blow into this little mouthpiece on a big tube, okay? Most of the people in my office have taken breath tests on the new Drager machine for parts of training, right? And I've blown into that machine myself, and it is hard to do. So you need to really, don't mess around, because you don't want to get called a refusal, but you need to blow into it and try to get as much air into it as you can, because if the officer thinks that you're not getting enough air into the machine on purpose, even though you're trying, they can call it a refusal, and now you have those worse penalties, and now you get your blood being drawn, and we're back to square one. If you give an honest effort and it still doesn't work, you're going to have to go through this whole process, but it's important you're going to take some notes and write some stuff down afterwards to get to us or any attorney that's working with you, and we might need to get you tested medically. And so, are you going to go to jail? Well, if you've cooperated with the officer, there's a good chance that the officer's not going to put you in the jail overnight, but the officer could, and then your case will proceed from there. And we've got videos about first offense DUI, about second offense DUI, but again, this is an educational video about maybe some do's and some don'ts, in the future. God forbid that you think you might at some point in your life be dealing with a possible DUI pullover, or you're just interested in that subject. So I hope you found this useful. Again, this channel is to provide education for the public. There's not a lot out there. And so if you find it useful, please like and please subscribe and please share with others. The more people that subscribe to the channel, the more likely this will get shown to other people, and hopefully everybody will have better outcomes. So if you're in a DUI situation, if you need some type of help with the defense, you can also give my office a call. Again, I'm Lance Fryrear. My law firm has been defending this type of thing for more than 20 years. We'll listen to what happened, we'll identify a way forward, and we'll be there for you. Thank you.